All right, welcome back to Problem Solver Politics. We are going to continue analyzing the platform of Andrew Yang 2020, and apparently he just added a solution to fake news to his platform, but it wasn't just fake news. It was three things. What were they, Cody?
Well, the first thing I'm going to get into is probably, I don't know if I want to say the most radical, but it's definitely one of the most dramatic things he's proposing as far as this goes. It is his News and Information Ombudsman position he wants to create. Now,
great word, ombudsman.
Yeah, I'll bring that up in a second for you. But the short of it is, as president, I will imbue the FCC with the new office of the News and Information Ombudsman, whose role it will be to investigate complaints of deliberate, persistent, and destructive misinformation published by media companies and on social media, with the particular priority of curbing any foreign actors posing as citizens and impose fines as necessary.
Okay. I like the idea of obviously prosecuting non-citizens who are trying to meddle in elections, meddle in intelligence, so on and so forth. But I am scared to death of a governmental agency whose sole responsibility is the analysis of media, basically free speech, and the regulation thereof. I mean, that is 1984 thought police stuff. I'm okay with the Better Business Bureau. I'm okay with a lot of the libel and slander laws. In fact, if anything, I think there needs to be a lower threshold. I think there needs to be a lower threshold for libel and slander laws so you can actually win some of these libel and slander laws, cases. But regulating speech, that's basically what this agency would end up doing. Am I correct, Cody?
Well, it's tough to say if that is really what it'll end up with, because the thing that is kind of interesting, like a lot of Andrew Yang's platforms, they really go in tandem with something else. And one of his other platforms is media fragmentation.
Okay.
As president, I will create a media responsibility task force with the leaders of media and tech companies to discuss ways to get Americans agreeing on facts again and remove hostile foreign influence from our discourse, and allow this task force to operate free from government influence. They'll be supported by the government, but not directed by the government. And like I said, so a lot of Andrew Yang's platforms, they seem to, in a vacuum maybe, seem a little bit out there. But like I said, if there was...
Well, also, he's I noticed he's saying a lot about form a task force to analyze bad foreign media, as though there was some kind of insinuation that it's a bunch of bad players, bad foreign agents that are creating all of the dissension in America. That's obviously referring to the whole Mueller probe and all of those other things that were going on with supposed Russian influence. But that completely negates the fact that we don't need foreign actors in America in order for all of us to not get along. We do just fine ripping ourselves to shreds and being tribalistic and having online Twitter feuds and online Facebook feuds just by ourselves. So some of this kind of seems like a well-worded attempt to throw a bone to the Democrats that still want to believe that there was Russian collusion of Donald Trump and a bunch of Russian intelligence agents, and that somehow just a really effective Russian Facebook campaign bamboozled the Midwest into voting for Donald Trump, when in reality that didn't happen, has been found factually incorrect. And I don't think, as Rahm Emanuel said, don't let a good crisis go to waste. I don't think we need to create a government bureaucracy and oversight agency in response to a fake Russian collusion scandal. Am I wrong here?
I mean, I don't quite see it that way. I mean, one of the ways I see it, he kind of lists it here as one of his problems to be solved, is that media fragmentation has left Americans split on basic facts, which is making any discussion of important issues fruitless. I think, like I said, like a lot of his platforms, and they really kind of...
I mean, that's true. I like that he's tackling I didn't agree with Bernie Sanders on a lot of his criminal justice reform, but I like the fact that he was actually talking about one of the third rails. I don't necessarily agree with Andrew Yang's proposal on this. Actually, no, I shouldn't say that. I agree with half of his proposal on this.
Well, I mean, like I said, like a lot of his platforms and policies, like universal basic income, freedom dividend. Now, the debate becomes, of course, in how effective it actually is. But a lot of this stuff is kind of thinking ahead. It's trying to get ahead of stuff. For example, if foreign countries realize that, there probably, Mueller probe came out very recently when we're filming this. There probably wasn't any actual collusion between the U.S. and Russia. However, major networks ran that they're guaranteed was. Some are still saying there is. Some are saying they don't care what they don't care what people say, that there was collusion. So one of the things that the position like this would do, it was to prevent a country. It doesn't have to be Russia. It could be China. It could be North Korea, from just, if you could pick something, say it swung an election, say they stole an election from you and divide the nation. So when you have stuff like like I said, this is the media fragmentation that he's talking about, the Media Responsibility Task Force. It's not going to be directed by the government, just funded by the government, which always gets tricky. But the idea being, as long as they're doing their job and we know we have some baseline facts we can disagree on, then when you have this news and ombudsman position, it's not going to be as draconian and drastic, because remember, there's almost like a civilian oversight bit saying that, like, no, look, we've agreed this is something worth talking about. This is something that can be discussed in the media. Also, this isn't fake news. So then if we have an agreeing on what fake news and fake news isn't as a country, then you give the ombudsman position to say, hey, this is foreign meddling. We should do something about this.
Okay. I think this definitely is falling into the I'd like to have a conversation with Andrew Yang category to clarify some positions, because there are some precedents of effective civilian oversight instead of government oversight in media. For example, the reason why we have rated R, PG-13, PG, and rated G is because the MPAA, the Motion Picture Association of America, was formed by the motion picture industry because they were worried about censorship. If you ever look at the very famous old original gangster films like James Cagney in Public Enemy and so on and so forth, Mae West, for example, she had a famous quote where she said, "I love censorship. I made tons of money off of it." There was a legitimate concern in the movie industry that the government was going to step in and begin censoring content in movies. And they got ahead of it, much like Andrew Yang right now is saying we got to get ahead of this. And they said to the government, hold on, hold your horses. You don't need to censor us. We're going to begin censoring, reviewing, and establishing guidelines for our own content before you censor us. And they formed the MPAA. And if I'm not mistaken, I think...
So, hold on a second. Are you a fan of the MPAA? I think they're morally upstanding. I mean, I will admit that they're better.
No. I definitely think there are wild hypocrisies and complete logical missteps.
And then how do you want Mark Zuckerberg and Jack Dorsey and whoever on Snapchat to sit down and decide how they're gonna censor themselves? Well, no, how they're gonna patrol news on their platforms. Okay. I mean, is that really that much better?
Well, at the end of the day, this is all I'm suggesting. I think the MPAA, despite all of its flaws, is a much better alternative to a government censors bureau.
I mean,
because at the end of the day, you don't have to have your film rated. Half these movies, when you go to independent film festivals, it shows up and it says this film has not been rated by the MPAA. So it's not mandatory, which a government bureau would make it mandatory. Well, it's not taxed. It's...
Hold on, though. I mean, could a movie that's not been rated by the MPAA be shown in a theater?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. There's plenty of movies.
I mean, I have to imagine
it's less marketable.
There we go. It's not good. So what happens if Mark Zuckerberg doesn't want to give you the stamp of approval on your news website?
Well, hold on.
It's just not marketable.
No, but there's precedents for this. For example, go to New York City, and there's a very popular company called Zagat. Z-A-G-A-T. Anybody that lives in New York City or on the East Coast has gone into a restaurant. It says this restaurant is Zagat rated, or they mispronounce it saying Zagat's. Okay, but it's very popular to see that sticker on there. And foodies and food enthusiasts oftentimes won't go to a restaurant unless it's Zagat rated. And to be honest with you, the Zagat rating or the Yelp rating on the restaurant has more to do with driving traffic to that restaurant than whether or not the government's A or B is on the window. And so, I mean, in my mind...
Again, though, dude, you're saying Mark Zuckerberg should be able to give you a stamp of approval.
No.
On your news website.
No.
Well, but I'm saying is, dude, news is a lot more important than Marvel movies and gangster movies and faux places. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's important stuff.
Okay, but we got to compare apples to oranges here. The MPAA, nobody knows who's on the board. and one of the rules is
not news.
Okay, but I mean they're both broadcast media.
But I would like to think there's a higher standard of what counts as fake news and doesn't, and what counts as an R movie or a PG-13. Like I don't care about the difference between R and PG-13.
Okay, all I'm saying is I don't think a government controlled bureaucracy that can shut down or fine its citizens for the media that it creates is the correct solution to this problem. I think a private attempt is going to be far more useful than a public one. Does that make sense?
I mean, like on its surface level, sure, it makes some sense. However, like I said, the companies we're talking about here are, we're talking about like Facebook controlling, and Facebook does this today. There already is the Facebook Mark Zuckerberg trying to control what news can be on the platform. Now, I think as things stand today, he should have that right. It shouldn't be a big deal if Facebook says, hey, look, we don't want this website to be on our thing as far as government intervention goes. Because I agree. I mean, theoretically, you don't have to have Facebook. And now it leads to an entirely different discussion that I don't think we have time for tonight, which is about if they should kind of change the classification of social media and use it more public utilities. The idea of nationalizing Facebook terrifies me. You know what I mean? Like something like that is an awful idea.
You're just ragging on me when I say that the idea of nationalizing media or nationally regulating media terrifies me.
Well, no, I'm just saying I don't trust a private company to regulate itself. Okay. And like I said, sure.
We don't trust a private company to regulate itself, but we also don't trust the government to regulate properly the private company. So I think it needs to be a consortium of duly elected people from the industry and then two people that are out of the industry, similar to the MPA. Anyway, kudos to Andrew Yang for being the only guy in the Democratic field right now who seems to be addressing this. More on his platform coming. This is Problem Solver Politics.